and we pick a move and we practice it for a certain number of repetitions. And if I do that, I'm going to get better at the technique. Okay. They're wrong.
Can I ask you about something that I truly enjoy and I think is really powerful, but most people don't seem to believe in that, but is drilling. I don't know. Maybe people are different, but I love the idea, maybe even outside of jiu-jitsu, of doing the same thing over and over. It's like Jiro dreams of sushi. I love doing the thing that nobody wants to do and doing it 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times more than what nobody wants to do. So I'm a huge fan of drilling. Obviously, I'm not a professional athlete, but I feel like if I actually gave myself, if I wanted.
Oh, this is interesting. I know when you first start out, especially in jiu-jitsu, you you want to get as much mat time as possible, and most of the time people get that through drilling. So I definitely want to know what John Danaher says about drilling, because when I got started, that's pretty much what I did, mostly just doing a bunch of drills. I didn't really roll much in the beginning. When I did, it was just rolling to survive and kind of just working on whatever I drilled. But drilling was the main aspect, especially when I started. So let's see what Danaher says.
To be really good at jiu-jitsu, like reach the level of being in the top 25 when I was much younger, like really strive, I think I could achieve it by drilling. That's I had this belief untested. Can you challenge this idea? or agree with
Okay.
it?
First off, fascinating. However, we're going to have to.
Disagree?
No, no.
Okay.
We're just going to have to start to understand what are we talking about when we talk about drilling. It's a very vague term.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you're at this moment, many of your listeners are probably having the same thought process, which is, oh, drilling. Yeah, I know what that is. We go into the gym and we pick a move and we practice it for a certain number of repetitions. And if I do that, I'm going to get better at the technique. Okay. Um, they're wrong.
Mm.
We've got to have a much more in-depth understanding of what the hell we're talking about when we talk about drilling. Ultimately, any movement in the gym that doesn't improve the skills you already have or build new skills is a waste of time, a waste of resources. Everything.
That makes a lot of sense. Just because, especially when you start out, you're not even familiar with a lot of the terms, the positions, you know, like the movements itself. So it makes sense. Like in the beginning, you're trying to learn the movements, but once you learn the movements and you kind of figure out like, okay, this is called this is that. If you, I would assume if you do it to the point where you're just constantly doing that and nothing and you're not adding anything to it, you're kind of just wasting your time, um, because you're not adding anything to the things you've already learned. On the other hand, I can see someone saying like, well, if you wanted to make it perfect, you would just continue working on it. um, but I think what Danaher is getting at is, if you learn a movement, and you work on it to the point where you feel like you're comfortable with it, but you want to keep adding to it, right? Because while you're adding something new to it, you're still working on the previous thing. So, for example, if you learn a transition to a submission, right? once you figure out, like, once you're comfortable with that transition, and then you start working on that submission, just focusing on the transition, yeah, you're going to be good at it, but it's not going to be effective. Like, you're not going to know what to do afterwards. Whereas you train to the point where you're comfortable with the transition, but then you start adding the submission, and now your game kind of just opens up. So I think that's what he's getting at. But let's see.
Everything you do should be done with the aim and the understanding that this is going to make me better at the sport I practice. If it's not, it shouldn't be there. The majority of what passes for drilling in most training halls will not make you better, including some of the most cherished forms of drilling, which is repetition for numbers. The moment you say to someone, I want you to do this 100 times, what are they really thinking about? Volume. They're saying, okay, I'm at repetition 78. Yeah. I'm at 80, 20 more to go. All their primary thought process is on numbers. That's not the point of drilling. The point is skill acquisition. When people drill, don't get them focused on numbers. Get them focused on mechanics. That's what they have to worry about.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. The gym that I go to and I started with, we didn't really do it in terms of number. We did it until we were comfortable. So, and that could be different for everyone, right? So, like, in a class, some of the younger, more athletic, maybe coming from wrestling or other combat sports, they may pick up certain moves a lot quicker than someone who doesn't have the same background. So that makes sense. Like, if everyone's just doing 100 of something, everyone's not going to be at the same level. So I think drilling something to the point where you're comfortable and you're familiar with with that movement, but also I think it's muscle memory. Like, once you have it in your muscle memory, like, I've noticed this during rolling, something that I drilled or pressure tested during rolling, my body, like, I wouldn't have to think about it. And I think that's the whole point, right? Like, when you're rolling, you don't want to think. You want to just let your body react to what you're familiar with and what you know. So I think that's the point, right? Like, if you're drilling to the point where you're just doing it for numbers, then you're not adding anything more to that. Whereas if you drill to the point where your body understands it and your body remembers it, so if it's ever in that situation again, it will just know how to react. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I never have my students drill for numbers, ever. Just 1, 2, 3, get the fuck out of here. Are you kidding me? Like, how are you going to get better with that? Okay, get them working on the sense of gaining knowledge. That's my job. I have to give them knowledge. I have to explain to them what they're trying to do. That starts them on the right track. But knowledge is one thing. Skill is another. If jiu-jitsu was just about knowledge, then all the 60 and 70-year-old red belts would be the world champion. They're not. Jiu-jitsu isn't won by knowledge, it's won by skill. Knowledge is the first step in building skill. So my job as a coach is to transmit knowledge. Then I have to create training programs where the path from knowledge to polished skill is carried out. That's the interface between me and my students. And so I give them drills where the whole emphasis is upon getting a sense where they understand what are the problems they're trying to solve and working towards practical solutions. They never work with numbers. They work with mechanics and feel. Then you have to bring in the idea of progression. When you drill, there's zero resistance. When you fight in competition, there's 100% resistance. You can't go from 0 to 100. There has to be progress over time, where I have them work in drills with slightly increasing increments of resistance. And just as we talked about earlier with the weightlifter who doesn't start with 500 pounds, but who begins with the bar and then over time builds the skills that one day out there in the future he will lift 500 pounds. So too, that Jujigatami that you're working on today is feeble and pathetic, but 5 years from now you'll win a world championship with it.
Yeah, that's exactly how I started jiu-jitsu with my coach and my training partners. My close friend, he's the one who got me into it, and I got into it during the pandemic, and so I was just rolling with him, and that's basically like that's how we did it, exactly as Danaher said. We like he would show me a move, show me a technique. I would do it once, he wouldn't give any resistance, and then I would do it the second time, and he would give like 10% more resistance, and then I'd do it another time, and 20, and keep going, like keep progressing. So I can get a feel for how it is, like if somebody's resisting, because that makes absolutely a lot of sense. If you're drilling without any resistance, then yeah, the move is just gonna be easy. But in a real competition setting, or real self defense or rolling, they're not gonna just give you something, right? Like you have to kind of bait them, or make them or open that position up. So it makes a lot of sense. Like, yeah, you have to understand resistance, and you have to figure out like what to do. Like, are you gonna do like push pull, or do you need to create space, or close the distance, or things like that. So yeah, that's absolutely true, and I agree with that.
You can't have this naive idea of drilling as something you just come out, you randomly pick a move, and you work for numbers until you're satisfied a certain set of numbers that your coach threw at you, and then you think you're going to get better. There's even dangers with drilling.
Also, I kind of just want to add this just kind of came to my head. If you are drilling just for numbers, then you're not gonna have different variables. I feel like, because like you can, let's say, like you're learning boxing or kickboxing or whatever, right? You're throwing a punch, and you're throwing exactly the same way, 100 times. But if you're sparring or drilling with some type of resistance, each time you throw the punch, it's gonna be a little bit different, right? Like your partner or opponent is going to be maybe at a different space, right? Or maybe move a little bit different, or their resistance may be different, like which they may not have fully controlled. Or if like they're holding the pads, like you know at repetition 5 they were holding it higher, at repetition 10 they're slightly lower. So your angle of the punch is slightly different. So yeah, that makes perfect sense, because if you're just doing one punch 100 times, you're not adding anything new. You're not adding a new variable into it. And fighting, especially whether it's competition or real life, self-defense, then that's all there is, right? There's just different variables all the time. And just because you practiced like something just one way, doesn't mean it's going to translate in a different situation, or slightly different situation, if that makes sense. So yeah, let's continue to see what he says.
There is no performance increase that comes once you get to a certain level and you just keep doing the same damn thing. Let's say, for example, you come out and you hit 100 repetitions of the armbar Jujigatami from guard position, and you're all proud of yourself because you hit 100 repetitions, and your body's tired, and you're telling yourself, man, I got a good workout. And you come in tomorrow, you do exactly the same thing. You come in the day after that, and a week goes by, and you've done the same thing. Then a year later, you do the same thing. Ask yourself, has your Jujigatami really gotten better? No, you've performed literally thousands and thousands of repetitions. you've spent an enormous amount of training time and energy that could have gone in different directions on something which didn't make you any better. Drills have diminishing returns. Once you get to a certain skill level, if you just keep hammering on the same thing in the same fashion for the same amount of time, you stop getting better.
Can I, partially for fun, partially for devil's advocate, but partially because I actually believe this, to push back on some points, is it possible? So everything you said, I think, is beautiful and correct. But the asking yourself the question, am I getting better, is a really important one, and you could do that in training. Is there a set of techniques, maybe a small subset of all the techniques that are in jiu-jitsu, where you can have significant skill acquisition if you put in the numbers or the time, whatever, on a technique against an opponent who's not resisting? Let me elaborate. What I've, maybe I'm different.
You'll probably have to furnish an example.
Yes. Let me first make a general statement, then I can give examples. The general statement is, I found that through repetitions, and this is high repetitions, combined with training, but high repetitions against a non-resisting opponent, I've gotten to understand the way my body moves, the way I apply pressure on a human, because it's not actually zero resistance. The opponent's still laying there. They're still keeping their legs up. They're still doing, they might not be resisting, but they're still creating a structure.
Yes.
A non-dynamic
They're
structure.
presenting a target.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not dynamic, so you can't master the timing of things, but you can master but I felt like I could gain an understanding of how to apply pressure to the human body over thousands of repetitions.
But I feel like you can do that with a little bit of resistance. I know what he's saying, like, you know, the body's still there. You may have to move an arm. You may have to move, your arm or neck or whatever. And there's some level of resistance, but, the person can also just add, like, they don't have to go 100%, but they can add a little bit, like give you slight resistance, just so, because I feel like if they don't give any resistance and you're just, dealing with the frame and whatever resistance comes from dealing with the frame, that's all you're going to get used to, right? Like, when you roll, it's going to feel completely different, versus if there's slight resistance, maybe like the first few, maybe like 1, 2, you can do completely zero resistance. But I think after like a couple, doing it with a little bit of resistance just gives you a better sense of time, as Lex said, just a better sense of timing. So yeah, I don't think just doing it over and over and over and over with not any intentional resistance helps. I mean, I could be wrong, and I feel like everyone is different, but yeah, for me, in my journey, getting to blue belt, I didn't train like that at all. I trained more like how Danaher is expressing, basically, with starting out with very little resistance, then a little bit more and a little bit more. Actually, like, something I like doing more than drilling is kind of flow rolling. So that's like kind of in between, drilling and like full on live rolling. I do like flow rolling, but a lot of the times I, still want to work a move and try to do it in rolling, because I want to see if I can actually get the timing right and, apply the right amount of pressure. So yeah, I would have to disagree with Lex on this one, but let's see John's response.
Now, for example, I just to give you an example to know what we're talking about. There's a guy named Saulo Ribeiro and Shanji Ribeiro that have this, I guess, I already forgot, but the headquarters position or something like that. But putting pressure as you pass guard, like medium passing distance kind of pressure. I've did thousands of repetitions of that to understand what what putting pressure with my hips feels like. To truly understand that movement, I felt like I was getting much better. It's like it's hard to put into words, but that skill acquisition is so subtle. Just the way you turn your little like hips.
But you're already talking about
Yeah, I feel like you would still get that with a little bit of resistance. I mean, like you can do high repetition of drilling, but even with a little bit of resistance, you still will get that. If anything, I feel like you'll get it faster just because your body will adapt to, like it's becoming muscle memory. Like if you're drilling without any resistance, I feel like your muscle memory is that of no resistance. I mean, I know he said, frame, but still your body is knowing like, okay, like there's no pressure this way and your body will react. Well, I feel like if you drill or like flow roll or whatever, if you do it with some level of resistance, your body will remember that more than it will just not with no resistance.
a better form of drilling now. You're going beyond the basic numbers and you're getting the sense of feel and mechanics, which is what we want in drilling.
But the reason I say numbers, and maybe you could speak to this, but this might be an OCD thing, but it allows you to take a journey that doesn't just last a week or 2 weeks, but a journey where you stay with the technique for 2-3 years. And there's a dedication to it, where it's a long-term commitment to where you're forcing yourself, perhaps there's other mechanisms, but you're forcing yourself to stay with a technique longer than most people around you are staying with whatever they're working on. And you're taking that long journey. And the numbers somehow enforce that persistence and that dedication.
First thing, that journey's a wonderful thing. And if that technique is a crucial part of what you do,
Yes.
then it's time well invested. But always understand.
Okay, I think I understood it differently, but yeah, I don't think he's talking about pressure, but just repetition in general. So, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I guess like if you're working on a certain, you're a high level competitor, you're working on a game plan, or you have your kind of go to or signature, and you're developing that. To the like you're very very effective with it, but you want to make it more effective and efficient, right? Like you want to always be able to get to that entry and then to that submission, no matter where you are, no matter what your position is, you want to be able to get that. So yeah, I think that makes some sense. Like if you work on it for 2-3 years and you pretty much worked on every single scenario or possibility, or as as possible, and you can get to that, then yeah, I think that makes sense.
Saying that it comes at an opportunity cost, that by spending that amount of time on that one technique, you've sacrificed other things that you could have learned that could have won you matches. So understand that every focus upon one element of the game comes at the opportunity cost of other elements. Now, as long as you're playing a part of the game where, okay, this is central to what I do,
Yes.
okay, that's fine. But just be aware of the danger of opportunity cost. That's something no one talks about in the training room, but it becomes very important. Secondly, the other question you have to start asking yourself is, okay, that training clearly had benefits for you early on. But when the point of diminishing returns starts coming in, if you feel you're just doing the same thing, then it's time to switch. Now, if you feel you're still getting benefit from it, by all means, continue. That will be a call on your part. You've been playing this game a long time now, so I would trust your call on that. But my job as a coach is to look out and say, okay, this kid's been working cross ashigarami for 6 months. And I feel he's gotten to a good skill level. If he stays any further on it, the opportunity cost becomes greater than the expected benefits of continuing it. And that's my job as a coach, is to direct things in that fashion. If I can do a good job with that, then I can take them to the next level of drilling. and start amping it up. And that's how I keep progress over time. My biggest fear is to have students run past the point of diminishing returns, staying stagnant, where opportunity cost comes in and they're not making the progress they could in the time that they've been working.
I mean, it was almost a philosophical question for me. That's what I was always on the search on, because I know my mind is likes drilling. I don't like relying on other people for improvement. And drilling allows me to do something that is 100% me.
It's interesting, Lex. You say you don't like relying on other people in drilling, but in drilling, you really do rely a lot on your partner. One of the first things I do when I coach people is I teach them how to drill. That's a skill in itself. And drilling is, in a sense, the opposite of sparring. Drilling is a cooperative venture where you work as dance partners, complementing each other's movement. If I drill with Gordon Ryan and I want him to work arm bars, I will move my body in ways which make it an interesting exercise for Gordon. I'm not just sitting there and he does a repetition and then okay, he does 10. I can't wait for this to be over so I can do my 10, and I can't wait for all this to be over so we can just spar and get over with all this bullshit. That's the sad truth of most drilling and jiu-jitsu. There's a sense in which when good people drill, it's like watching good people dance. They move in unison and complement each other's movement and make each other look better. Sparring, on the other hand, is the exact opposite of that. That's resistance, where you're trying to make the other person look as bad as possible. And once you understand the different directions in which drilling and sparring go, that's when things start getting interesting. You start getting fast progress.
That makes sense. One thing Lex said was he doesn't like, depending on the partner for drilling. It kind of made me think like jiu-jitsu isn't like a striking sport like boxing or kickboxing, where you can hit the bags or you can shadow box, so you can't really practice the moves or transition as you would if you were shadow boxing. So yeah, I think that was kind of odd, but yeah, I think what he meant was the partners maybe not knowing, as John said, not knowing how to resist or kind of ease up or kind of go with what you're trying to do rather than just laying there, right? So yeah, I think it's not like boxing, it's not like kickboxing. So yeah, definitely need a good partner, and then a good partner will increase your game by many folds.
Yeah, just you're absolutely right. I think I was not very eloquent describing what I mean. I found myself not able to find in jiu-jitsu too many people that are willing to dedicate a huge amount of time to a particular technique.
I concur with you on that, Lex. Now, answer the interesting question. Why? Why can't you get people to drill with you?
By the way, if I could just shout out, the people that did drill with me is usually blue belt women because they're smaller. They don't like training because they get their ass kicked because they're much smaller. So they're willing to invest a significant amount of effort into training.
That's good, but their motivation for doing so is not good.
Well, yes, but
when
exactly.
your motivation for drilling is because you don't want to get your ass kicked, that's not a good motivation.
Black belt ever. I could never find a black belt that I could drill with like this. Now
let's go back to that question.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't. I mean, this. I am somebody who likes to say nice things about people. So
let me answer for you.
Yeah.
2 reasons: because they find it boring.
Yes.
And secondly, perhaps more importantly, they don't believe it works.
Yeah, those are good answers.
And now let's go further and ask the truly interesting question: why do they believe that?
If I were to answer it, in the context of Russian wrestling, where drilling is much bigger part, is I think culturally that was knowledge that everybody tells each other in jiu-jitsu that drilling doesn't work?
Because they're never taught how to drill. No one ever sits you down one day and says, okay, this is how you drill. And so the exercise feels futile. They don't feel their skill level is going up. They don't associate drilling with increased skill level. They associate sparring with increased skill level, but not drilling, which is a tragedy, because it is a fantastic way to introduce and expand the repertoire of a developing student. It's an essential part of every workout I teach. I always say the game of jiu-jitsu begins with knowledge and builds up to skill. Who wins is the one who has greater skill, and 9 times out of 10. So to me, it's a tragedy that what you're saying breaks my heart to hear that you couldn't get a black belt to drill with you. That's shameful. And but I understand. I sympathize with those black belts too, because the way in which most people are told to drill does feel ineffective, and it is damn boring. They'd rather just spar. They feel like they get more out of the workout, and it's if anything an indictment upon most of the.
I think it's also a time issue, right? Like I'm going to speak from sort of a hobbyist perspective. Like if you're if your class is like an hour long, hour 15 minutes long, and you could only dedicate so much time to drilling. Like you eventually want to get to rolling or sparring, which is for most people that's the fun part, right? So if you're a hobbyist and you're just drilling, I mean, yeah, you may get to a belt. Well, maybe not, but you may be really good at like certain aspects of the drills that you do, but when it comes to rolling, you're going to be missing out on a lot of things. But also, I feel like if you're just drilling, there isn't the component of stamina and endurance, right? Like when you're sparring or rolling, your endurance and stamina gets taxed and is tested as well. And I feel like with that, that's also improving, especially like if you're starting out and you're getting sort of mauled, or you're just basically there to survive, right? Like you're getting a lot of pressure put on you by better people or bigger people, and the whole time you're kind of learning like how to breathe under that pressure. You're kind of learning how to be okay with that feeling of drowning, or that feeling of intense discomfort. But yeah, if you're just drilling, you're kind of missing those components. So yeah, I feel like if you flow roll or spar or roll, you'll get a lot of the things you would get from drilling, but also the physical and endurance aspect. But that's just what I think.
The training programs around the nation.
Would you say that drilling, if you were to build a black belt world champion, would drilling be what percent of their training would, in the entirety of their career would be drilling?
Great question. Let's first put a proviso on it that I don't do the same thing for all athletes. Everyone's got a different personality. And like Nicky Rod, I can only hold his attention for 2 minutes at a time. And Gary Tonin, 5 minutes. Gordon Ryan, 5 hours. Like George St. Pierre, 5 hours. Travis Stevens, 5 hours. They are just laser focused. So everyone's different. Let's put that down as our first proviso. You probably knew those answers already.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
But as a general rule, if I run a 2.5 hour class, you can expect an hour and a half of it to be, I'm going to use the word drilling, but I'm also going to say that this is too complex of a story to give now with words. I would need to demonstrate it. But the way in which we drill is not your standard method of drilling. And then it's into sparring. But if you give me a choice between a bad drilling partner and sparring, I'd make the same choice that most black belts make, which I would go with sparring.
Because you can create drilling with it
Exactly.
within the sparring environment.
Like, good drilling is a wonderful thing. Bad drilling is just a worthless waste of time.
Oh. Well, yeah, that was an interesting conversation. It was very informative. Yeah, I agree with John on this one. Definitely makes sense. I've been training that way as well since I started jiu-jitsu, and that's how I was able to get to blue belt in a relatively short time. So yeah, this was awesome. I definitely look forward to doing more of these. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you drill how John is how John basically mentioned, or do you prefer to do like repetition and if you learn that way? Yeah. So leave a comment, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.